I'd like to introduce Annie from England, who has multiple sclerosis. Welcome, Annie.
Hello.
Could you tell me when you first started to notice MS symptoms?
With hindsight, probably about 20 odd years ago, but I wasn't actually diagnosed till 2007. The symptoms were quite relatively mild and vague, as MS symptoms can be, and I was initially diagnosed with various other things before we got to a correct diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. What were your symptoms initially?
I think probably the very first symptom was fatigue, an extreme kind of crushing tiredness that goes with MS, which at the time I just put down to life, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that was closely followed really by numbness initially in my right hand.
Hello? Hello?
Hello, yeah?
I lost you. It went
right.
ping and it went. So I need you to start with numbness in my, was it right hand?
Right hand, that's right.
Yeah, I need you to start there because I lost you.
Okay, yeah. Numbness in my right hand, and it was only in my right hand to begin with, though over the years it's spread to all, you know, my arms and legs.
Mm-hmm. So how did it impact on your life being diagnosed with MS?
When the diagnosis finally came, in a weird kind of way, it was almost a relief because I actually had an explanation for some of the things that had been happening to me, and I think I'd spent a lot of time being fairly self-critical in some ways. You know, I shouldn't have these problems. I should have more energy. I should be able to get on with things because various medical tests hadn't shown very much wrong with me. Therefore, I just had to try harder. So when I actually got a diagnosis, like I say, it was almost a weird kind of relief.
What would you say your quality of life was before you started LDN on a score of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest?
It was, before I started LDN, I had a lot of problems with neuropathic pain, particularly in my legs, and that impacted on my sleep. And that obviously impacted on my fatigue levels. I think my quality of life was okay. I'd say kind of 6, 7 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
But partly because I tend to push through problems and get on with things. But the LDN certainly helped in that it greatly reduced the neuropathic pain, so indirectly improved my sleep. Mm-hmm. And obviously with a lot of benefits all round because I was sleeping better, so feeling better and not in pain so much.
Mm-hmm. And how did you find LDN?
I'd vaguely heard of it because it gets written about in, you know, MS magazines and also word of mouth. And at the time, probably about 18 months ago, I'd been prescribed low-dose amitriptyline for the neuropathic pain and didn't get on with it at all. It made me very drowsy. And in discussion with the MS nurse about the fact that I was going to stop taking the amitriptyline because the side effects were worse than the benefits, you know, she asked me if I'd thought about LDN and told me a little bit about it, and I thought it was worth at least giving it a go on the basis that she said I wouldn't experience any negative side effects, and it might help, and if it didn't help, I could just stop taking it, you know, so it was worth giving it a go. It was quite difficult to get it, though.
How did you manage to get a prescription?
Well, I spoke to my GP initially to see whether he would prescribe it on the NHS, which he couldn't do. or give me a private prescription, which he wouldn't do. And then I spoke to Dixon's in Glasgow on their LDN helpline, and they gave me a list of contact telephone numbers for different doctors who would prescribe LDN on a private prescription. And I spoke to one of those doctors, and I now get the prescription from him every 3 months.
Okay. So initially when you started, did you have any side effects?
I don't think I did, no. The MS nurse and Dixon's and stuff that I'd read had talked about sometimes people experience very vivid dreams. And I've always tended to have very vivid dreams. So it's difficult to know whether the dreams that I did have were anything to do with LDN or just, my norm. I suppose I did have quite odd dreams, not upsetting or distressing, just a bit weird. But that was a very minor thing.
Mm-hmm.
And, if it was anything to do with the LDN, it didn't bother me. In fact, I quite like having vivid dreams.
And how long would you say it took before you started to notice benefits?
I can't really remember. It was quick, though. I think I was initially prescribed, I think it was 1.5 mils. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that I noticed much difference taking that dose, but then I gradually increased the dose, and probably over the first few weeks, first sort of 6 or 7 weeks, I began to notice a reduction in the pain, which in the end was quite dramatic. I was having it for a good part of most days, and especially at night, and then I was rarely having it. So it was quite a dramatic change when it did come.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for me has been the main benefit, that reduction in the neuropathic pain. And my neurologist was initially a bit sniffy about the fact that I was taking LDN. But then when I saw him fairly recently and said again about the reduction in pain, he said, well, yeah, it could possibly be helping me with that. So a lot less sniffy than he was.
Yeah. What would you say to other people who are contemplating trying LDN?
Well, I trust my MS nurse, and she has said that it can't do any harm. So I think it's worth trying, because it will either help or it won't. And if it doesn't, you can always stop taking it. So it would seem to me that if it can't do any damage, it's worth giving it a go. I think it's a shame, though, that there's a financial implication, because I can pay for it, but although it doesn't cost a lot of money, that's an issue for some people, isn't it?
It is.
And it might deter them, and I do think it really should be available on the NHS for a range of people, not just people with MS, because I've come across people with rheumatoid arthritis and fibromyalgia and other conditions who have also benefited. So I don't really see why a GP can't prescribe it.
Well, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us. I really appreciate it.
Okay, you're more than welcome.
But you do know, this is now not being recorded, but you do know that LDN can be prescribed on the NHS. And there are, I think, about 860 doctors so far that are prescribing it on the NHS.
Yeah, I presume that depends on the local primary care trust.
No, it isn't. How it works is, if your doctor thinks it's a therapeutic benefit and is prepared to put their name to it, they can prescribe it.
Right.
If the PCT will fund it, it comes out of central government funding.
Yeah.
If they refuse to fund it, the GP can still prescribe it, but it comes out of the practice's budget.
Right. I don't know for sure, but I'm assuming that the PCT here won't fund it because somebody I know who has fibromyalgia, her GP actually wanted to